My husband forced me to sign off my $2.5 million penthouse and family heirlooms until his own lawyer. Video intro music fades out, a close-up on the narrator's face, a hint of steel in her eyes. There I was, pen in hand, staring at the divorce papers, and across from me, my husband, Marcus, with this utterly smug grin. "Sign it," he practically purred, "or I'll drag this divorce out for years."
So I signed.
But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that with every stroke of that pen, he wasn't taking everything from me. He was signing his own damn eviction notice and so much more. The next morning, his attorney called him, screaming. And that, my friends, was just the beginning of his nightmare. But let me take you back to where this whole mess truly began. 6 years ago, I met Marcus at a fancy charity gala in downtown Seattle. I was 32, freshly promoted to lead architect at Morrison Design Group, feeling on top of the world. But honestly, a little lonely. I'd spent my 20s grinding, sacrificing everything for my career. Relationships? They took a back seat. Marcus, with his charming smile and perfectly tailored suit, swooped in. He talked about his revolutionary tech startup, how it was going to change the construction industry. Looking back now, the red flags were waving like crazy. The constant name-dropping, the vague answers about his actual product, how he always insisted on splitting the bill because equality matters, even though I later found out his credit cards were maxed. But I was vulnerable. He made me feel seen. He asked about my day, remembered my favorite wine, even showed up at my office with lunch when I forgot to eat. We got married after just 18 months. My mother, God rest her soul, had passed away 2 years before that. But she left me 3 things that meant everything. Her vintage Cartier watch from the 1950s, a stunning collection of original watercolor paintings she'd created throughout her life, and a handwritten letter telling me to never, ever let anyone dim my light. I kept the watch in my bedroom safe. The paintings hung proudly throughout what I considered our penthouse. And that letter? It stayed in my nightstand, a constant, quiet reminder of who I was. The first year of marriage felt good. Marcus was attentive, supportive, always hyping his next big venture. I didn't mind covering our expenses while he got his company off the ground. Partnerships require sacrifice, right? That's what I told myself. Then came year 2. His startup crashed and burned. Investors pulled out. He blamed the market, the timing, his former business partner. I held him while he cried, told him we'd figure it out. And then I quietly paid off the $30,000 in debt he'd accumulated without ever telling me. Year 3, he launched another company. Then another. Each one, a glittering, empty promise. Each one, requiring my seed money. And each one, collapsing within months. Meanwhile, I was promoted to partner at my firm, pulling in $300,000 a year. Marcus? He was pulling in excuses. By year 4, he stopped even pretending to work. His office was the golf course. His business lunches stretched until dinner. He bought designer clothes, claiming he needed to look successful to be successful. I should have left then. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run. But I kept hearing my mother's voice, telling me marriage required patience, that good men sometimes needed time to find their path. I clung to that. Then I found the text messages. It was a Tuesday evening. Marcus had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. A notification popped up from someone named Sophia Chen with a little heart emoji next to her name. Asterisk, can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby. Wear that shirt I bought you. Asterisk, my breath caught. My hands started to tremble, a cold dread washing over me as I scrolled through their conversation. 6 months. 6 months of I love you, and you're the only one who understands me, and the one that truly broke me. As soon as I get my share of the divorce, we'll be set for life. Sophia Chen. I looked her up. Instagram influencer. 200,000 followers. All luxury lifestyle content. And there, in her recent posts, sparkling on her wrist, was my mother's Cartier watch. My mother's watch. The one I thought I had misplaced 3 months ago. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw his phone through the window, drag him out of that shower, and demand answers. But a colder, Harder resolve took over. Instead, I took screenshots. Every single damning one. I forwarded them to my email, and I put the phone back, precisely where he'd left it. That night, while Marcus slept beside me like nothing was wrong, I lay wide awake, planning. I thought about my mother's paintings, still hanging on my walls. I thought about the prenup Marcus had convinced me to tear up on our first anniversary, whispering, "We're partners now. We don't need legal barriers between us." I thought about the 5 years I had spent supporting this man who was actively, meticulously planning to take half of everything I had built. The next morning, I called my college roommate, Helen Park. She had become one of the most respected family law attorneys in Washington state. We hadn't spoken in months, but she answered on the second ring. "Helen," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I need help. And I need discretion." We met at her office that afternoon. I showed her everything. The texts, the financial records proving Marcus had contributed nothing for 4 years, the story of the destroyed prenup, the photos of my mother's watch on Sophia's wrist. Helen leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Here's the thing, Elena," she said. "Without that prenup, he could claim half of everything, even assets you brought into the marriage, if they've been commingled. But I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've learned that the best defense is making your opponent think they've already won." "What do you mean?" I asked, a glimmer of hope in my chest. "We're going to let Marcus believe he's outsmarted you," she said, her smile widening. "And by the time he realizes what actually happened, it'll be far too late." Over the next 6 months, Helen and I worked in secret. I transferred the penthouse, which I'd purchased with my mother's inheritance before I even met Marcus, into a revocable living trust, listing it as my separate property. The transaction was buried deep in a mountain of paperwork that Marcus, predictably, never bothered to read. I restructured my ownership in the design firm, ensuring my partnership stake was legally protected as separate property through a series of technical amendments my partners gladly approved. I documented every single expense Marcus had made on my credit cards, every investment I had funded in his endless parade of failed businesses, every piece of jewelry he had borrowed to give to someone else. And most importantly, I installed security cameras, hidden, disguised as smoke detectors, throughout the penthouse. Washington is a 2-party consent state for audio recording, so I made damn sure they only captured video. But video, my friends, was enough. The footage was sickening. It showed Marcus and Sophia in my home while I was at work. It showed them going through my closet, my jewelry box, my personal files. It showed Sophia trying on my mother's pearl earrings, laughing about how I'd never noticed they were gone. And then, it showed them boxing up 3 of my mother's priceless paintings and carrying them out to Sophia's car. The day I discovered those paintings were truly gone, I nearly broke. I came home to empty spaces on my walls, raw wounds where my mother's artwork had hung for years. I called Marcus, trying to keep my voice steady. "Have you seen my mom's paintings? The ones in the living room?" "Oh, those old things," he scoffed. "I donated them to clear up some wall space. They were depressing anyway." Donated. Depressing. My mother had spent decades creating those paintings. They were worth maybe a few thousand to an appraiser, but to me, they were priceless. They were her hands, her vision, her love made visible. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried silently for an hour. Then, I dried my eyes, reapplied my makeup, and continued with the plan. Helen had prepared a very special document for Marcus to sign. On the surface, it looked like a basic agreement, acknowledging the division of minor assets during our separation period. But buried deep in the dense legal language was a clause where Marcus would acknowledge receiving full and final compensation for any claims to property acquired during the marriage. The trick, of course, was getting him to sign it without reading carefully. Fortunately, Marcus had never read anything carefully in his life. 3 weeks ago, he came to me with his own demands. He'd consulted some discount lawyer who had probably told him he was entitled to half of everything. "I want a penthouse," he announced over dinner, "and half your partnership stake. Oh, and monthly spousal support until I get back on my feet." I pretended to argue. I pretended to cry. I let him believe he had won. Fine. I finally choked out, my voice breaking convincingly. But I need you to sign this acknowledgement of our asset division first. My attorney says it's just a formality. Marcus barely glanced at the papers before scribbling his signature. He was too busy texting Sophia about their upcoming victory celebration. And that, my friends, brings us back to where I started. The document I signed 3 days ago. The one that looked like I was surrendering the penthouse. In reality, I was signing a quitclaim deed that had no legal effect whatsoever because the penthouse was already protected in my trust. The deed was meaningless. But Marcus didn't know that. He also didn't know about the document he had signed, the one acknowledging he had received full compensation and waiving any future claims. The morning after I walked out, Marcus woke up in what he thought was now his penthouse. He tried to make coffee, but the smart home system didn't recognize his voice anymore. I had removed his access the night before. He tried to call building management, but his name wasn't on the ownership documents. Never had been. The trust owned the penthouse. I was the sole trustee. He tried to leave, to get coffee somewhere else, but his Tesla wouldn't start. It was registered in my name, paid for with my money, and I had remotely disabled it through the app. He tried to call an Uber, but his credit cards were linked to my account. All declined. He tried to call Sophia to pick him up, but she wasn't answering. She was a little busy dealing with the Seattle Police Department, who had arrived at her apartment with a warrant to search for stolen property. My security footage had clearly shown her removing my mother's paintings from my home. Helen had filed a police report the day before, and the King County prosecutor was very interested in pressing charges against an Instagram influencer with a documented history of receiving stolen goods from a cheating husband. They found everything at Sophia's apartment. My mother's Cartier watch, her pearl earrings, the emerald ring that had belonged to my grandmother, and all 3 paintings, still in their original frames, leaning against Sophia's bedroom wall like trophies. Sophia was charged with possession of stolen property and conspiracy to commit theft. Her influencer career, built on that luxury lifestyle content, immediately crumbled. Brands don't like associating with accused criminals. Her 200,000 followers watched in real time as her carefully curated image fell apart. Marcus, meanwhile, was served with papers at the penthouse that no longer belonged to him. Helen had filed a civil suit for conversion of property, unjust enrichment, and fraud. We were seeking the full value of every item he had stolen and given to his mistress, plus damages. His discount lawyer reviewed the documents Marcus had signed over the past 6 months and, apparently, lost his mind. That's when Marcus received the phone call I mentioned at the beginning. His own attorney, screaming at him for signing away his rights without reading the fine print. "She played you," the lawyer reportedly yelled. "Every document you signed was designed to trap you. You have no claim to the penthouse, no claim to her business, and now you're liable for theft and fraud. How did you not see this coming?" Marcus called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat in a suite at the Four Seasons, a glass of champagne in hand, watching the Seattle skyline sparkle through floor-to-ceiling windows. Helen called with updates every few hours. The police had recovered all of my mother's belongings. Sophia had been released on bail, but was facing serious charges. Marcus's civil case was going to cost him everything he had, which wasn't much, but it would follow him for years. "There's one more thing," Helen said, a slight chuckle in her voice. "His attorney is trying to void the documents Marcus signed, claiming duress or fraud on your part." I laughed. A deep, satisfying laugh. "Good luck with that." "Exactly," Helen said. "Every document was witnessed, notarized, and reviewed by independent counsel. Marcus chose not to read them. That's not your problem." Their motion was swiftly denied. "You're going to come out of this with everything you had before you met him, plus damages, plus the ultimate satisfaction of watching him explain to a judge why he gave his mistress his wife's family heirlooms." The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Marcus got nothing. Less than nothing, actually, because the court ordered him to pay restitution for items he had stolen and sold or given away over the years: the silver tea set that belonged to my grandmother, books from my father's collection, small things he had taken, thinking I wouldn't notice or wouldn't care. Sophia pleaded guilty to a reduced charge and received probation plus community service. She had to return everything she had received from Marcus and issue a public apology. Her influencer career never recovered. Last I heard, she was working at a department store cosmetics counter, a far cry from the luxury lifestyle she had flaunted online. Marcus moved back in with his mother in Spokane. No penthouse, no Tesla, no designer clothes. Just a man approaching 45 with no career, no savings, and a reputation that would follow him through every Google search for the rest of his life. Some people might think I was cruel, that I should have just divorced him, moved on, taken my losses, and started fresh. But those people haven't held their dying mother's hand and promised to protect her legacy. They haven't watched a stranger wear their grandmother's jewelry on Instagram. They haven't listened to their husband describe priceless family artwork as depressing. I wasn't cruel. I was thorough. Last week, I rehung my mother's paintings in my penthouse. I placed her Cartier watch back in my bedroom safe, alongside her letter that I still read whenever I need strength. I sat in my living room, surrounded by everything she had given me, and finally let myself feel the grief I had postponed for months. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the years I had wasted on someone who never deserved me. I cried for my mother, who would have seen through Marcus immediately if she had been alive to meet him. And then I dried my eyes, poured myself a glass of wine, and made a toast to the empty room. To new beginnings, I whispered, and to never letting anyone dim my light. The penthouse was quiet. The city sparkled below. And for the first time in 6 years, I felt like myself again. My mother always said that the truth has a way of coming out, that liars and cheaters eventually face their own reflection. She said that strong women don't seek revenge. They simply remove the obstacles and let karma do its work. I didn't seek revenge. I just stopped protecting Marcus from the consequences of his own choices. I stopped covering for him, paying for him, pretending not to notice when things went missing. I stopped being his safety net. And without me to catch him, he fell. Some nights I wonder if I could have done things differently. If I had confronted him about Sophia the day I found those texts, would things have ended better? Would we have had an honest conversation about what had gone wrong in our marriage? But then I remember the way he laughed with her about stealing from me. The way he called my mother's paintings depressing. The way he planned to take half of everything I had built while contributing nothing but lies for 5 years.
No.
There was no honest conversation to be had with Marcus. There was only extraction, like removing a tumor before it spreads. Helen and I still have lunch once a month. She's become more than my attorney now. She's a reminder that the women we meet in our 20s, when we're all struggling and dreaming, sometimes become the people who save us in our 40s. You know what the best part is? She said at our last lunch. His own attorney basically called him an idiot in court. Said he had never seen a client so thoroughly outmaneuvered by their spouse. The judge actually laughed. I smiled at that, not because I enjoyed Marcus's humiliation, but because it validated what I had always known. I wasn't the naive wife he thought I was. I was the woman who had built a career, earned a partnership, and purchased a penthouse before ever meeting him. I was my mother's daughter, and we don't break easily. If you're watching this and seeing pieces of your own story in mine, I want you to know something. Document everything. Find a good attorney. And never, ever let someone make you feel like you're asking for too much by wanting to keep what's yours. My husband thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought a charming smile and false promises would be enough to take everything I had worked for. He was wrong. And now, every morning, I wake up in my penthouse, make my coffee in my smart kitchen that only responds to my voice, and look at my mother's paintings on walls that belong to me and me alone. That's not revenge. That's justice. If you've made it this far, drop a comment below and let me know what you would have done in my situation. Would you have confronted Marcus immediately? Would you have just walked away and let him have whatever he wanted? And if you've been through something similar, I want you to know you're not alone. There are more of us than you might think. Women who loved too hard, trusted too easily, and had to learn the hard way that some people just don't deserve our loyalty. But here's what I've learned. The same strength that makes us loyal to the wrong people can also make us unstoppable when we finally redirect it toward ourselves. My mother knew that. She raised me to know it too. And now, finally, I'm living it. Thank you for listening to my story. This is Elena, signing off from Seattle, where the rain has finally stopped and the sun is coming through my windows, lighting up the paintings that came home where they belong.